Hey again, everyone. Great to see you here at SG1 College Football. I'm Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. I've got my YouTube channel over on, just search the voice of college football, Mark Rogers TV. Lock it in here at SG1 College Football. This is our Sunday night show that we deliver to you each and every week right here at SG1 College Football. Our weekend wrap-up show. All right. So we can talk about anything under the umbrella of college football. Anything you want to talk about, just leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics in the live chat. Also, you can call me. I will post the number in just a few minutes at 860-325-3687. In the meantime, I am going to run down the coaches poll and the top 25 rankings. Also let you know that I've got my top 25 that actually makes sense. My top 25 actually makes sense. We post that every Sunday afternoon over on my channel, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So check that out. You will get a bit of a different perspective on what rankings could look like. So give that a look. Again, leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics in the live chat. Also want to run down each and every Power 5 conference now that we can welcome the Pac-12 to the party. First weekend of play in the Pac-12, minus 4 teams, unfortunately, because Cal and Washington were not able to play, nor Utah and Arizona. But we do have the Pac-12 in play, and a very exciting game in the very first Pac-12 game of the year, a 9 a.m. local start at the Los Angeles Coliseum with USC going down by 13 points. Scoring 2 touchdowns in the final 3 or 4 minutes to upend Arizona State in what we expected to be a great game, but also expect to be a pivotal game, maybe the key game in the division. So USC wins 1, but in knocking down Arizona State, and because of the opponent, because of the situation, Utah wasn't able to play its first game, and there's no wiggle room in the schedule, no flexibility within the Pac-12 schedule. Huge comeback and win for USC. So we're going to go through the conferences, shape up the conference races as they stand right now in all the Power 5 conferences. Of course, look back on the weekend that always delivers when it comes to college football. We had some great games, as we always do. Of course, the big 1-4 matchup, Clemson going down in overtime at Notre Dame. I will keep my eye on the live chat. Want to again encourage you to call on in at 860-325-3687. I will get that number posted in just a second. So with the number 1 team in college football, my number 2 team, Clemson, it was, I believe, the AP poll's number 1 team and the coaches poll number 1, Alabama at 2 coming into the weekend. So with number 1 going down, who gets elevated to number 1? I believe the AP and the coaches poll, which I'm going to check out here in just a second, have elevated Alabama to the 1 spot. Notre Dame certainly has an argument. And really, if you're just talking about who's accomplished the most on the field, those are the only 2 teams who have a valid argument for number 1. Ohio State's only played 3 games against very marginal, to be kind, marginal opponents. And then, of course, Cincinnati in the group of 5. The thing I'll credit Cincinnati with, as it's taken me forever to pull up the rankings, Cincinnati has dominated its schedule, and they play in the best of the group of 5 conferences, the American Conference. They play opponents like Tulsa, like Memphis, like UCF, like Houston, that would fare fairly well in the Power 5, would win their share of games, and would compete. And Cincinnati just is not 6-0 with a bunch of 1 and 2 score wins. They're 6-0 with blowout wins against the best teams in the group of 5. Best teams in the group of 5. Houston over the weekend, 38-10. That comes off the heels of SMU 49-13. They beat SMU 49-13. And another big win against Memphis as well. They blasted Memphis a couple of weeks ago. So Cincinnati has done everything they possibly can against that schedule. Now, the schedule down the stretch includes UCF and Tulsa, and then, of course, a conference championship game that is going to factor in heavily for Cincinnati trying to make a jump to the college football playoff, which I think is a long shot. But with the Big 12 with no undefeated teams, and of course the Pac-12 has the burden of proof in playing so few games and already missing 2 games. So if the Pac-12 misses any games among the contenders for the playoff, that coupled with just upsets, and the Pac-12 has not had an undefeated team in, wow, let's go back. I believe it's been since 2014 since the Pac-12 had an undefeated team in the regular season. So think about that. Oregon in 2014, en route to the college football playoff and the national championship game, went undefeated, won the Pac-12 championship game. No, they had a loss that year. Even Oregon had a loss in 2014. I believe we've got to go back all the way to 2010 since the Pac-12 emerged with an undefeated team through the regular season and the conference championship game. There you go. It's been since 2010. It's been 10 years since the Pac-12 went through, albeit a 12-game schedule, with the conference championship game, 13 games. But I don't know that even in those examples in which the Pac-12 almost made it through, they lost conference games. They weren't losing non-conference games. So the Oregon team that went to the 14 championship game, keep in mind that they lost a conference game, I believe, against Stanford as their one loss. Stanford got close a few times, but they lost conference games. And so that's how improbable it is that the Pac-12 will have a undefeated champion. Their supposed second best team almost lost to Arizona State, should have lost to Arizona State. So we'll check out the rankings. I don't give the rankings much play because I've got my own rankings that I believe make a whole lot more sense. Thus the name, the top 25 that actually makes sense. So let's point out the inaccuracies in the polls and the rankings and what we've got. So in the AP top 25, it's Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, the top 3. Clemson drops to 4, Texas A&M 5. Florida's at 6. All right, it's good to see that Texas A&M's actually ahead of Florida in the AP poll because they actually noticed that the two teams played, I guess. Cincinnati at 7, BYU 8. What are we going to do with BYU? So BYU on Friday night went to Boise State, dominated that game. Boise State lost its backup quarterback, Jack Sears, lost and had to go to the third-string quarterback. That obviously hampered Boise State immensely. BYU still dominated the game at 51-17. Somewhat compromised Boise State goes down. So BYU stands now at 8-0, number 8 in the country. So they needed that type of showing against Boise State. That is their game of the year. Miami at 9 hasn't shown us much. They haven't played anybody outside of getting blasted by Clemson. A lot of top 50 type wins against NC State and Pitt and Virginia and Louisville. Indiana's at 10. They've got their entire season in front of them. They're off to an amazing start, obviously. They've got Penn State out of the way. Rutgers, a more difficult opponent than any of us anticipated. And Indiana with a huge win against Michigan for the first time in 33 years. They will attempt to pull off the same feat against Ohio State, another team that they have not defeated in 33 years. In fact, and we'll have to see when the Buckeyes and the Hoosiers get together, Ohio State has the best winning percentage against Indiana of any 2 Power 5 teams currently going during a stretch of time going back 50 years. Ohio State 42-2 against Indiana since 1968. Oregon, I've got them lower in the rankings. I think you actually have to play games to show that you've earned something. So Oregon's at number 11. I think that's way too high. Georgia's at 12. Wisconsin And I can't think that most of the rest of the rankings really matter outside of Oklahoma State, which the AP has at number 14. I've got Oklahoma State up at 10. They played a really good game a couple weeks ago against Texas in terms of statistically winning the game, blowing it with 4 turnovers and a -4 turnover deficit. They've beaten Iowa State. They beat Tulsa. Coastal Carolina comes in at 15, Marshall at 16, Iowa State 17, Oklahoma, and on down the line. None of these other teams will factor into the playoffs. Liberty's obviously an interesting case at 22, and why Northwestern is down at 23. They're 3-0. They beat a Maryland team by 40 points that then beat Minnesota and blasted Penn State, a preseason top 10 team. Northwestern beat Iowa after being down by 17 points on the road. Yeah, that was on the road. Down by 17, came back and won that game. And then they beat Nebraska. Why is Northwestern that low? Because they're Northwestern. I've got Northwestern in the top 10. All right. We've got some comments coming in. And let me get the eyes on. Jimbo, who do you think will win Bedlam, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma? So are they playing this week? I have not looked at this week's schedule. I believe Oklahoma State's the best and most well-rounded team in the Big 12. They have the best defense. I saw Oklahoma State play most of the game against Tulsa. I watched every play against Texas. Those are the 2 times I've seen Oklahoma State play, and they held Texas to under 300 yards of total offense and blew the game. I know Oklahoma's getting their act together. Can't really look at what they did over the weekend against Kansas, but blasted Texas Tech the week before, are starting to annihilate people, starting to do what they should do against a Kansas and Texas Tech. I know that they've taken a lot off of Spencer Rattler's plate. I did watch them enough against TCU the week before that, in which I was impressed with the defense, only giving up 7 points against TCU, Oklahoma's defense, and that they really protected Spencer Rattler from the standpoint of offensive line protection, but also game planning and play calling protection. And I think they finally got to a place where they know how to handle him and have done the right things with Spencer Rattler. So again, I'm guessing you're pointing toward this weekend. Let me pull up the schedule. Yeah, so you must be just asking in general about Oklahoma State. I don't see them on the schedule for this week. I like Oklahoma State right now in that game. Of course, home field advantage is going to play into it to a certain extent. So I would like Oklahoma State less if they've got to go to Norman. So good to see you, Jimbo. We've got Austin on the line. A lot of people coming over from Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I love that. Hey, Michael. Yeah, smash the like button. Thanks for the encouragement there, Michael, and thank you for reminding everyone. It just helps us. It helps SG1 College Football. It helps me when you do it on my channel to just take those 3 seconds and smash that like button. YouTube loves it. They love the like button. They want to see likes on a video. So if a video's got 5,000 views and 50 likes, and another one's got 5,000 views and 1,000 likes, it is going to push the video that people like into the suggested videos for more people to watch. And that's what we need to keep us going. Otherwise, if we can't continue with this, then unfortunately we can't. Nate the Great, don't be late. Now just Nate Dog. Okay. Angel is Miami out. Angel, welcome to the program. Meaning out at the ACC race. They are if Notre Dame and Clemson continue to win. If Notre Dame and Clemson continue to win, then Clemson will win the tiebreaker against Miami for the second spot in the ACC, and Notre Dame will be the 1 seed. Now, if Notre Dame slips up and we've got a 3-way tie with 2 spots open, then you got a tiebreaker that I believe we would need to delve into. I have asked this question a number of times because I've researched it and couldn't find an answer to the ACC tiebreaker system this year. The ACC tiebreaker system most years when they have division play is very similar to the NFL playoffs. Very similar in regards to running down head-to-head, of course, and then common opponents and a number of variations within division play, division record, points against. It very much lays out as a NFL type playoff tiebreaker. All right. So again, if Notre Dame wins out, Clemson wins out, Miami's out because of the tiebreaker loss to Clemson. If Notre Dame loses and you get a 3-way tie for those 2 spots, then I've got to think that Miami's out, because if you look at the round robin between the 3 teams, Clemson beat Miami, Notre Dame beat Clemson. So if you go between those teams, Notre Dame's 1-0, Clemson's 1-0, or Clemson's 1-1, Notre Dame's 1-0, and Miami's 0-1. Miami would be out. Miami's in a difficult spot. They need Notre Dame to lose or Clemson to lose. Clemson losing would be the best remedy for Miami, because then they get the obvious advantage of just overall record over Clemson. All right. Bob. Who do you think will be in the playoffs after week 10? I will start by saying my preseason college football playoff was Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas. Texas not looking so good with 2 losses. They could have won both games. They lost in overtime to Oklahoma, and they fumbled at the 1-yard line going in against TCU with 2 minutes left. So Texas could be doing well for me, but they're really not legitimately a playoff team, but they should be undefeated. So right now in the playoffs, I still believe that Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama are better than everybody else. Wow. Because after that, you need an undefeated, most likely you need an undefeated team in the Pac-12. Oklahoma State needs to win out. They cannot lose again, and they need to keep their fingers crossed going 10-1 with a conference championship. Again, USC, Oregon would be the 2 most likely candidates at 7-0 to come out of the Pac-12. I don't think that's going to happen. I see those teams losing. There has not, I don't know if you guys were here right off the top, but I was running back in my head Pac-12 standings, and I can't find an undefeated team in the Pac-12 in the regular season and Pac-12 championship game since 2010 Oregon. Then you've got the Cincinnati case. And the Cincinnati case, I believe, is going to come down to them needing to go undefeated. It should help them that they've dominated a good conference, the 6th best conference in the country. They're winning these games, not 28-24. They're winning them convincingly against everybody. So they need to continue to do that. And they most likely need a 2-loss conference champion. Georgia's demise helps Cincinnati and the other conferences. Penn State's demise helps, unless, of course, Indiana would go undefeated, lose to Ohio State by a field goal. Actually, maybe the best scenario for the Big Ten to get a second team would be Northwestern to go undefeated, lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game by a field goal, and be 8-1. Notre Dame's win against Clemson puts them in a position that they could lose the ACC championship game and make it. It's possible, because I think we're still going to have carnage in the Big 12. Everybody's beating everybody. Oklahoma State barely survived Kansas State this weekend. They lost to Texas. They have yet to play Oklahoma. They have played Iowa State and Kansas State and Texas. So Oklahoma State's real, and they also beat West Virginia. So their real test left is Oklahoma. And if Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, then the conference is really sabotaged. Oklahoma State's the only team with one loss. All right. So saying all that, Bob, I'm going to go with the playoff of Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama. Texas A&M. We talked a number of times last week about Texas A&M on my channel. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, by the way. Join us over there. We have a great time. We have call-in shows all the time. Midnight tonight, in fact. We got a call coming in here. Welcome to SG1 College Football. This is Mark Rogers. What's going on?
Hey, Mark. It's Nate Dogg right now. Used to be Nate's great number 8, a.k.a. Nick Hinkson. How you doing, sir?
So now we've got nicknames, and then we've got, like, former aliases to go by.
Well, it's because on Piskin Pete's channel, I got there late like twice. Yeah. So I had to change my name. But,
Nate, give me just a second here, Nate. I want to finish my point on Bob. I shouldn't have taken your call, but just let me finish up because he's asking who's going to make the playoffs. So I gave you a long dissertation there, Bob. I will finish up by saying off the top of my head without giving it thought, since I'm going to knock my preseason Texas pick out with the 2 losses. We'll go with we'll fill in the 4th spot with Oregon. How's that? All right, Nate, go to it.
All right, Mark. It's been a rough season for me as a two-team fan. But I got congrats to Indiana just by saying like they're like shocking the world right now. Well, not the world, but college football world. But I mean, I'm really shocked that Indiana's like I wouldn't say contender right now, but they're trying to be a contender for a college football playoff. But would you agree, or like they're trying to be a contender? But I would say not that spot yet, but they're getting there.
So you're telling us that Indiana's getting there. They're trying to be a contender, but you don't believe that they are truly a contender.
Not yet, but I'm saying that I think they're close, but I know they're undefeated right now. But if they win another game, I would say they're a contender.
Okay.
They win. So, by the way, did Maryland win yesterday, or did they not play?
Maryland beat Penn State.
Wow. Penn State. Oh my gosh. Not being mean around Penn State, but man, James Franklin needs to figure out something. I don't know, but Tulia Tagovailoa is. I mean, the first week I think he kind of struggled because he was still getting used to the offense, and now that he's pretty good right now. And he's used to the offense and runs, but yeah, I think in 2 years that Maryland might be a good contender too. What do you think about that?
Their last coach, DJ Durkin, did a nice job on the recruiting trail. So they've built up a lot of speed and athleticism on the roster, and I think that's showing. And It's only 3 games and really only 2 well-played games out of Talia Tagovailoa, but he looks like the best quarterback that they've had in 15 years.
Yeah, I would agree. But yeah, I wouldn't say he's not too. Well, yeah, he's not too actually, but I know he's better, but he has to prove the critics that he wants to be like his brother too. But yeah, just calling in to say hi and just share what my thoughts are from yesterday. Mark, thanks for letting me call in.
We appreciate that, Nate. You have yourself a great night.
You too.
One of the great handles in college football. Nate the Great Don't Be Late, unfortunately, had to give up on that one for whatever the story was there. Robbie, what you got? Say Clemson beats Notre Dame in the ACC championship game 38-21. Does it have to be 38-21? Can it be 35-17? Can it be 41-24? Okay. Anyway, 38-21. Do you think Notre Dame is in or A&M? Also assuming Cincinnati loses. So Notre Dame's going to have a loss to Clemson, a fairly convincing loss, but they will have beaten Clemson. So you got Notre Dame against A&M. So A&M's 9-1 in this scenario. Notre Dame is going to be 10-1 with a loss to Clemson. A&M having not even made the SEC championship game with a loss to Alabama by 28 points. If it comes down to those two teams, I would select Notre Dame. I think they've got a better resume at that point than Texas A&M, having made it to the conference championship game and having at least split with the team that they lost to. That would be my thought. But that's an interesting scenario. That's quite possible. Mark, I have to ask, the reason why you dropped Purdue from 12th to 14th is because they couldn't play Wisconsin. If Purdue beats Northwestern on Saturday, where will you rank them in the top 25? Okay, the top 25 also depends on everybody else, Michael. So I cannot give you a determination on where somebody's going to be ranked because they don't play in a vacuum. And the reason Purdue went from 12th to 14th, I'd have to go through the rankings and see whom else played and had impressive wins over the weekend. So it all comes down to, I'm not looking at the rankings and looking at the previous week and saying, okay, this team was 11th and they won against a pretty bad team, but they did win, so I'm going to move them up to 10th. I'm not moving people up and down. I'm taking apart the rankings every week and I'm reconstructing them. So evidently I'm trying to think those teams that would have moved ahead of Purdue, but there's a few teams out there. I'd have to call up my rankings again to think of those teams that I vaulted ahead of Purdue, but I did so based on impressive wins. Yeah, I can't come up with who would fill those spots. I think, I can't come up with it. Anyway. Random Miles, is Indiana deserving of a top 10 spot after seeing how Penn State is starting? Well, certainly that hurts the resume. Penn State was supposed to be a top 10 team. Then after they lost to Indiana, we thought, okay, that was kind of a fluke loss. They're still pretty good. Then they lost to Ohio State, but they didn't get killed. But now Penn State went out and really, really looked awful against Maryland. The game was not as close as the final score would indicate. So for me, Indiana is the 8th ranked team in the country. And that is an undefeated record and an impressive win against Michigan, impressive against Rutgers, and they pulled it out against Penn State. Was that impressive? In some ways it was, the way they played in overtime and down the stretch, but it was not a strong performance against Penn State. Penn State's not as awful as they look right now. They're not nearly as good as the 8th ranked team in the country to start the season. But I think Indiana is going to look back on that game and see that they beat a decent team, So again, I measure the resumes in my rankings, and I think Indiana is worthy of the 8th spot. All right, who else in here? You guys are asking questions back and forth. So, Jimbo, I'm sorry, but the conference looks terrible other than Ohio State. Bob thinks A&M will get into the playoff if Notre Dame or Clemson lose in the ACC championship game. And I can certainly see that. They will have, at that point, is it 2 less games played? I think it's going to depend on what A&M does in these games. In addition to winning, they have to win, of course, but how impressively. They were impressive against South Carolina in a big way Saturday. So if they keep notching wins like that, where are we? Bob thinks that if Indiana beats Ohio State, then they might make the playoffs. Yeah, well, that's going to be the key game in the Eastern Division now. With Penn State and Michigan going down 2 and 3 times, it comes down to pretty much, unless Maryland really shocks us, Indiana, Ohio State for the Big Ten Eastern Division. And sure, yeah, if Indiana, if they beat Ohio State, they will be in great shape. Now, Indiana is not so good that we can assume that they're going to beat everyone else. Michael's got a point here, not thinking A&M will get in after being smoked by Alabama 52-24 and not being able to play for the SEC championship. Of course, Ohio State and Alabama have made it as teams that did not win their division, but that is a bad loss on the scoreboard. Now, it might be to the best team in the country, but I would feel more confident going with Texas A&M had they lost to Alabama 31-24. Bob, I can't see Purdue or Northwestern besting Ohio State or Indiana in the Big Ten championship. I can see one of them besting Indiana. I think all those matchups are a toss-up outside of Ohio State. Purdue, Indiana, Northwestern, Indiana. Our man Carl's on the line. What do you think about Penn State's downfall? This is the worst they have been in forever. Is Franklin on the hot seat? No. In my opinion, I say yes. Someone like Luke Fickell would be a great hire for Penn State. Okay. James Franklin, of course, took over for Bill O'Brien, who saved the program. Bill O'Brien did an amazing job in the aftermath of the Sandusky scandal. Scholarship reductions, a black mark or 2 or 50 against the program, top players not wanting to go there. Bill O'Brien got himself a quarterback in Christian Hackenberg, and he put together just genius offensive play calling and schemes to get his team to 7-5 and 8-4 in his 2 seasons. Okay, James Franklin comes in and goes 7-6, 7-6, off the hot 2 years at Vandy, 9-4, 9-4. So James Franklin was on the hot seat to a certain extent after going 7-6, 7-6, and off to a 1-2 start. But then they ran through the likes of Iowa and had the historic win against Ohio State. They win the Big Ten championship. They go to the Rose Bowl, and James Franklin has saved his job, and recruiting takes off. So he has recruited out of his mind since then, top 5 to 10 in the country in the last 3 to 4 recruiting cycles. Penn State has gone to the New Year's Six almost every year. Rose Bowl 2016, 2017, Fiesta Bowl, finished in the top 10, finished in the top 10 the year before. 2018, they did lose to Kentucky, went 9-4. Then last season, they win another New Year's Six Bowl. against Memphis in the Cotton Bowl, finished 11-2 in the top 10 in the country. Okay, so James Franklin's teams have finished in the top 15 in the country for 4 consecutive years. 10-3, no. 11-3, 11-2, 9-4, 11-2. 3 New Year's 6 bowl appearances, 2 wins, a Rose Bowl, a Big Ten championship. He's not getting fired for going 0-3. Or if they go 2-6 or 3-5, fill in the blank. James Franklin's not getting fired for a couple bad weeks of football. They lost on a fluke incidents. Now, he mismanaged the game against Indiana. He mismanaged the clock. He mismanaged the situation. He did not coach his players effectively, did not communicate to them effectively, or he could have saved himself against Indiana. He failed to do so. Yes, that's a bad. He is not a great strategist. He's a program builder. He's a communicator. He's a leader of young men. So he did blow the first game. The first game should have been won. And even with his mishandling of the game management portion of it, Penn State still should have won the game. The defense, after giving up just over 100 yards of total offense through the entire game, got torn to shreds on the final drive for 75 yards. And then, of course, 25 yards in the overtime to lose the game. So they lose the game by one of the closest margins and one of the closest decisions we've ever seen in the history of college football. Then they play Ohio State. Nobody expects them to win. Nobody outside of Clemson or Alabama most likely is going to compete with Ohio State in a close game. Certainly nobody in the Big Ten, it appears, and they played reasonably well. They hung in the game. And then this what happened Saturday is unforeseeable, that a Maryland team that just lost by 40 points 2 weeks ago to Northwestern could turn around and blast Penn State. So he's 0-3. He could have an awful, awful season. This is, especially this year, the type season that players could give up. It's a short season. They can see the light at the end of the tunnel if they're out of it, and they are. 3 games in, only 5 to play in the regular season, so they're almost halfway there already. The players could give up, give in, and Penn State's final record could be ugly. But he's not going to get fired. Not after what he's accomplished the 4 previous seasons. He's finished in the top 10 every year except one, and in the top 15 all 4 years. New Year's 6 bowl games, Big Ten championship. James Franklin has nothing to worry about. Michael, that could be possible, but Big 12 is hot garbage. Don't know who's kicking it around there. Blake is asking, what if Notre Dame loses by a field goal in the ACC championship game? Florida beats Bama, and Ohio State wins out, plus Texas A&M. All right. You've relegated us to 3 conferences. Ohio State wins out. They're going to be there. Florida beats Bama. They're the SEC champion. They're there. Unless they lose some other game before that. Notre Dame loses by a field goal in the ACC championship game. Then put them in. Your 4 teams under that scenario would be, not knowing, you didn't give me a Big 12, Cincinnati, Pac-12 scenario, but we'll assume they all lost a bunch of games to each other. Your scenario that plays out there, Blake, would be Alabama. Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. Alabama, so you're basically rating Notre Dame versus Alabama. I've got to think under that scenario that it's going to be Clemson, Florida, Alabama, Ohio State. Carl, Luke Fickell is who I would hire at Penn State. A lot of people would. Jimbo, I think Ohio State will dominate every team on their side. Carl thinks that James Franklin's gone. Maybe they hire back Bill O'Brien. Interesting. Yeah, he's looking for a job, fired by the Texans. Jimbo. And on the other side, a team may be undefeated, but they won't have a good enough wins, and they would have a loss to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Carl says Bill O'Brien would be a really realistic hire for Penn State, but Fickell is also realistic. Urban Meyer would be a perfect fit, but the chances are minuscule. Jimbo, I haven't really watched much of the Big Ten this year, so I might be underrating some teams, though. It's all eye test. We've got nothing else to go on. Blake, oh my bad, miscounted, but what if Cincinnati or BYU is undefeated as well? Hey, Misty, good to see you. Anybody else that I've missed here? Michael, why are you discounting Purdue's chances of possibly, especially if they beat Northwestern on Saturday at Ross-Ade? I don't know what you're alluding to. I think it's the most balanced division in college football. So I'm not discounting anyone except Illinois, for sure. Michael Hogue, he's ranking the conferences, the SEC number 1, the Big 12 or the Big 10 number 2, ACC, American Big 12, and Pac-12. Nate says Michigan's going 7-5 next year. Repeat, Misty, does Georgia have a chance of making the playoffs? No. Too many teams to vault. You'd have to place in front of Georgia right now Alabama, Texas A&M, and Florida just in their own conference. Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame in the ACC. Well, in the Big Ten with only 3 games played, Ohio State, Northwestern, and Purdue. And then in the Big 12, you would have to rate Oklahoma State for sure. And that would be it for me. And then the Pac-12 just got started. Andrew, yes, an 8-team playoff. I have done my homework, researched it, looked into it, devised a plan. I have laid that out on my channel a number of times. Yes, an 8-team playoff is the way to go. Okay, the first time that I heard about the playoff back in 2013 when it was determined we were going to go to a college football playoff, which I like to call an invitational. It's not a playoff. A playoff is an objective system. An objective system that determines what teams make the playoff. That's a true playoff. You don't invite teams to a playoff. The playoff is determined by the wins and the losses, and then has a tiebreaker system to determine how do we differentiate between 2 teams with the same record. That's a playoff. When we have rules, this is an invitational. You have to get an invite. Nobody can tell you how to get to the playoff. That's impossible. I am going to challenge anybody in the chat to tell me, what can a team do to guarantee it will make the playoff? If you can tell me anything that any given team can do to guarantee that they will make the playoffs, you tell me, and I will tell you why there are no guarantees of making the playoffs. So it's not a playoff system. It's more accurately described as an invitational. So if we went to a true 8-team playoff, then we could then determine that we've got 5 conferences, major conferences, and we can look at that even 1 to 2 ways in which we could either truly factor in and give an opportunity to the group of 5, or we need to tell the group of 5, go play your own championship because you have no shot in hell to play in the college football playoff. Let's at least be honest about it. Let's have the college football playoff selection committee go on a tour at the beginning of summer camp next year and have them visit all the group of 5 teams, visit them during 2-a-days, and gather them around for just a 5 to 10 minute announcement to let them know we appreciate your effort, you busting your tails, throwing your guts up, working as hard as you do, all the weightlifting, all the running, all the film work to do everything that you're doing. You have no chance in hell to make the college football playoff. That's what they should tell every team in the group of 5. It is actually, when you really think about it, an insult to even rank the teams from the group of 5 in the top 25 by the playoff committee, because they're not going to select any of them. So an 8-team playoff is the way to go, because my first reaction when the playoff was announced in 2013 was, well, somebody doesn't know math because they've decided to have a 4-team playoff with 5 conferences. How does that work? So yes, you need an 8-team playoff. Especially in this given season, there is no way to compare the conferences. No way to compare them. They don't play games against each other. Carl, what's your take on Michigan? In my opinion, they have looked a lot worse than Penn State. Harbaugh needs to be let go. He has all that talent, and he can't ever do anything. A great hire is Luke Fickell. So, Carl, understand that Luke Fickell can't work at Michigan and Penn State at the same time. That would be an interesting experiment if he could maybe coach virtually every other week, and he would travel back and forth. Has Michigan looked worse than Penn State? Generally, no. But it doesn't. It's not worth debating. They both looked bad. Michigan tore Minnesota to shreds, so at least they have a good performance under their belts. Penn State does not. Michigan did not play as well at Indiana as Penn State did. They were manhandled and lost by 17 points, while Penn State was right there and winning the game against Indiana. So Jim Harbaugh is not getting fired. He will be at Michigan at least through 2021. That's his final year on his contract, and I expect him to be back at Michigan. And if I was running the show at Michigan, I would not take this season into strong consideration like I would most seasons because of the obvious. I would also have a conversation with Jim Harbaugh at the start of 2021, and so he would know what the expectations were, and he would understand most likely what he needed to accomplish to keep his job. And what he would need to accomplish are things that he's not accomplished there, which he's done by a lot of measurements, a tremendous job there in improving the football program. But it would be by then year 7, and there would have to be a championship if I was running the show. But he's not getting fired this year. Get Indy Kid 3. I was at some friend's house watching the game, whatever game that was. Oh, after Book fumbled, I was about to leave. Then after they picked up that PI call late, then they couldn't convert on 4th, and I was heading out the door. Okay. Appreciate the update. Indy Kid 3, does Notre Dame get in the playoff if they get killed by Clemson in the ACC championship game? It depends on what else is going. They do not make these determinations in a vacuum. Carl, Fickell is a very good fit for Michigan. He is making Cincinnati playoff contenders. Imagine what he does with Michigan's talent. He fits the team. I see him making that team elite. Mark, I was referring to Purdue's chances for the college football playoff if they can run the table and lose a close game to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Not enough characters type replies. Well, again, we don't know what's going on elsewhere in the country, but Purdue would have a fairly strong shot if they were undefeated going into the Big Ten championship game and Ohio State was ranked 1, 2, or 3, and they barely beat Purdue. Yep. Austin says, assuming Alabama, Ohio State, and A&M win out and the committee doesn't give BYU and Cincinnati a chance, if Clemson beats Notre Dame again, who gets left out? So you're telling me that Alabama and Ohio State and A&M win out. Clemson beats Notre Dame. Well, Clemson's going to get in as a conference champion over A&M. So you've got Alabama, Ohio State in, Clemson in. And then if Notre Dame loses close in the ACC championship game, considering they've already beaten that team and they lose close to a top 3 team in the country, I think Notre Dame gets that last spot. And we see a conference championship game loser in for the first time. MSU #1 fan, Michigan State beats Ohio State. Can Michigan State still win the Big Ten East? Okay, Michigan State needs to win all of its games in the Big Ten. And that would put them at 7-2, 6-2 going into championship weekend. And let's see, they would have beaten Ohio State. They would have beaten Indiana. And they've only lost, Michigan State's lost twice. So they would still need those teams to lose again. So Michigan State needs to beat everybody in the Big Ten East, including Indiana and Ohio State. Then they need Indiana and Ohio State to go out and lose to somebody else to create a 3-way tie, and they will have beaten Indiana and Ohio State. Understand that you are really stretching that one. Matthew, can Indiana run the table and make the playoffs? Well, they can. I don't see it happening, but they could. Just want to reset the show. Say hello. I'm Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. You can join me on my YouTube channel. Just search Mark Rogers TV right in your YouTube search bar. Check us out. Lock in on the videos. We cover college football every day. Videos post all the time. I just released my top 25. That actually makes sense. Just posted that a few minutes ago before the show. And again, check out the videos. We bring on the best bloggers and broadcasters and writers in the industry, plus analysis from myself, live shows every day. Lock it in right here at SD1 College Football as well. Keep in mind that the Super Chat is on. Let's see. Michael, Mark, how crazy would it be if Purdue beats Indiana in the bucket game and then in the following week, Indiana beats Purdue in a good game? Is there a chance that both teams can make the college football playoff both at 8-1? Okay. So you got Purdue going undefeated, and then Indiana goes undefeated, and then they play for the Big Ten championship, and they split after playing in the old Oaken bucket game. Yes, they could both make the playoffs. Of course, there's going to be a certain level of leeway given to the conference champion, depending on the scores of the games. Yeah, it seems ridiculous to be talking about some of these teams in the college football playoff. They've never been connected, but we've got a shortened season, and we also have, in this case, 2 undefeated teams right now, 3-0 and 2-0, and we have got a shortened season. So maybe we see something crazy like that. Everyone's telling you, Michael, that that's a crazy idea, no chance, and they're most likely right. But this would be the season, because of the reduced number of games, to see something like that happen. Didn't necessarily want to post that. There we go. 860-325-3687. You are watching and listening to the Voice of College Football right here on SD1 College Football. And we bust our tails, both Chris and I, to produce the best college football content that we possibly can. We are always looking at your suggestions and requests, so please send those our way as well. We are coming up on 7 o'clock Eastern time. Also, want to remind you that I've got a call-in show on my channel, Mark Rogers TV, at midnight tonight. So we usually get somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 people on the line. Take your calls, your questions, your debate topics, your comments, and have a big time. Miami fans, any Miami fans out there, or just people that want to see Miami or Ohio State content, keep in mind that I've got an Ohio State channel and I've got a Miami channel. Just search Voice of College Football Miami, Voice of College Football Ohio State. As you can see on the crawl at the bottom of the screen, we've got a Patreon page that we would like to invite you to. You get an insider look at the Voice of College Football and my 30 years of industry experience, and a lot going on with our vision, our mission statement, our goals and objectives from a business standpoint. You get that insider look, as well as an exclusive live stream per your request. Every week, per your request, an exclusive live stream. Watch parties like we did on Friday night during the, who was playing on Friday night? Friday night, North Carolina State in Miami. We did a watch party, and we also have my predictions available. 16-4 against the spread Saturday. You heard that right. 16-4 against the spread on Saturday. You would have made a bucket load? Yeah, we'll go with a bucket load of money. Bucket load of money on Saturday at 16-4 against the spread. And again, you get my predictions. You get some betting advice, and you get Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info. We'll go with the lead pipe lock of the week. How about that? All right, everyone. Appreciate the comments, the questions, the debate topics. Bring it right back here. Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, Friday at 6. And again, I'll be back here next Sunday at 6. Also on my channel tonight, call-in show, big call-in show tonight at midnight. See you all next time. Good to see you, Matthew, as well as Michael and everybody else who contributed. Ethan, Chris, MSU #1 fan, Alan, and others. Carl as well, of course, and Indy Kid 3. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you tonight at midnight Eastern.